Interesting week. Ice conditions have sort of been constantly changing, so teams are having a bit of a struggle with that, but no big surprises. I mean, you look at the top 4 teams on the leaderboard, you've got Ontario, who was the favorite coming in, Alberta, Manitoba, and Newfoundland all right there at the top. That's your top 4 teams on paper coming into this event. And then, again, no surprise with the next sort of group where you've got, BC and you've got some Saskatchewan and those sort of teams all kind of floating around the middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I have Jenn Casey with me here of 95.7. She is a local journalist and curling enthusiast as well. Jenn, you have a question for Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we talk a bit about Manitoba? It's first time Alberta, the first time in 11 years that we're not seeing Furby or Martin.
Yeah, quite a streak they were on between, the Furby, the Fab Four of the Furby foursome, whatever they would nickname them, and Martin going on that great run. I mean, a province with so many great teams, for that to just be two teams dominating for that long is so unheard of.
Now, I've been hearing a lot of talk in the patch about perhaps doing something similar to what the women do. You bring back the defending Scott champions, their Team Canada. Do you think that would work in the Brier?
The Brier is its own event, and it really is just it's the way it's always been. And I think part of the appeal about the Brier is that it was always about Joe Worker. It was always about that guy who works 9 to 5 and comes into the curling club, and and he's got a chance at being a national champion. And I think when you get into the Team Canada stuff, it changes the playing field in that. When you sign up for the first stage of playdowns in your local curling club, your club playdowns to try to get to provincials, you all of a sudden you're on the same level as a Kevin Martin, or you're on the same level as a Jeff Stoughton or a Brad Gushu. They all start at the same point, and I think that's part of the appeal of it.
So you think it does give an unfair advantage bringing in a Team Canada?
I don't think it's unfair specifically. I just think it's not the way it was always set up to be done.
Right.
We were talking earlier about the Ian Fitzner-LeBlanc rink. They have struggled mightily. What's going on with Ian?
I think it's the rookie part of him. It's new. This is a massive environment you're playing in. We talked about it briefly earlier in the week, and it's not really a huge step up from the provincial championship, but the hometown crowd has a lot to do with it. It's either going to help you or it's going to hurt you. And I think maybe that intimidation factor of playing in front of a hometown crowd has sort of been a little too much weight for his shoulders, and they're not playing the way they did at provincials. To call a spade, they played terrific at provincials to get to where they are, and they're not playing the same. It's a different team out there than we saw at provincials.
Is he a little bit in over his head?
No, I think it's just part of the learning curve. I think it's a case of he's going to learn a lot from this experience, and next time he's back, you can expect probably maybe a different preparation, a different mindset, and expect him to perform better each and every time. Glenn Howard, these guys, they didn't win the first year that they went. Jeff Stoughton didn't win the first time he went to the Brier. So, I think Ian Fitzner-LeBlanc is in that category that he's going through a learning experience right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking a bit about the state of curling in Nova Scotia. Can you comment a bit about that? Like, where are we? How far off are we before we're going to see somebody really challenging for the title?
That's a really good question because obviously Mark Dacey in 2004 was able to achieve that. He lost the final in 2003, was able to go back in 2004 and win the thing. I was obviously fortunate enough to play with Mark this year. Mark explained it to me this way. He said in 2004, they were good enough to get close, and then they had a really good game. If they were to play Furby 10 times, they may only beat him 2 or 3 times, maybe not even that. But all they needed was one game, one chance, and the chips fell into place for them. Since that time, the bar has been elevated by the top teams so much that they've left those mediocre teams, and I shouldn't say mediocre, but they've left the top provincial teams from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, Northern Ontario. They've left a lot of those top teams behind because they've literally turned into professional curlers. These guys are doing it on, if not a full-time basis, nearly a full-time basis. And the reality is, someone like myself and Mark Dacey, in our team, we all work, 40, 50-hour weeks at our regular jobs and squeeze in curling at lunchtime and squeeze in some vacation time for weekends away to travel to Spiels. These guys, that's all they do. They're away, 20 weekends out of the year.
What's the best rink at the Brier so far? Ontario 5-0.
Absolutely, top to bottom. That's the best team here. Does that mean they'll win? Absolutely not. Does the best football team on paper always win the Super Bowl? Not even close. So I would look to see Ontario probably are going to cruise to that 1-2 game, and then anything can happen in the playoffs. That's why we watch. You
were talking about there's usually that one team that kind of sneaks into the semis on Saturday. Who are you thinking? Who are you thinking at this point?
You know what? It's funny because like we, as you and I were discussing earlier in the week, the top four are really running away with it here, and so I would look to it, but all of a sudden, tiebreakers happen. So I'm looking at, BC seem to be playing well. Northern Ontario, that's a good young team. They're a very strong curling team. They just they might need a little more experience, but if things go their way, they could definitely be in the mix. It's a long week, and just because someone's at 3-3 or whatever the case may be, they just got to get hot for a few games.
How long of a week is it? I mean, just describe. Some teams play an 8 a.m. draw and they play a 7:30 p.m. draw. How long is this week really on the guys?
It's long, but it's not like it's unprecedented because these guys play weekend spiels that they play 4 or 5 days in a row, sometimes up to 3 games a day. I played an event in Switzerland this year. There was actually 4 games in one day that we played. So they're conditioned. They're ready for it. The fatigue factor is mentally. It's such a long week, and there's just so many long games and tough situations that physically they're fine. It's the mental fatigue that has a tendency to leak into some of the inexperienced teams.
Getting back to this Ian Fitzner LeBlanc rink, so they're 0-5. Tonight they got the Northwest Territories, then they have PEI, Northern Ontario. If they go once, let's say they manage to pull off 2 or 3, you think they'll start to feel a lot better about themselves, start to consider the weekend or the week kind of a success? No question. I think right now they're at the point where they didn't want to be, but they're going to be really relaxed now. The pressure's off. They're for all intents and purposes, they're out of the playoff picture, if not mathematically, very close to being it. And so the pressure's off. I think they can go out, they can enjoy this experience. I was talking to a couple of the guys last night, and they just kind of said, they're disappointed, but they said, you know what, they wouldn't change it for the world. This is a great opportunity to play from the hometown crowd. When they get that first win, when I know they will, I look for that crowd to really get behind them because they're just a great bunch of guys. Very good.
Yeah.
Describe the atmosphere down there all week. Is this you've been to a couple of these? Is this shaping up to be as good as the ones in the past?
Halifax is a great Brier spot, and I think part of it is the arena's downtown, the trade center is downtown where we're having the Brier Patch. So everybody's having fun. I was here a little past my bedtime last night here at the Patch, and visiting a few people and having some chats and telling some stories. And it was a Monday night. It's amazing how many people are here on a Monday night, Tuesday night, Sunday night was fantastic. It was a boatload of fun down here. So if you're listening and you're thinking about coming down, you can watch it on TV. It's a great way to watch curling, but you don't have the atmosphere, and it's electric around here. It's a lot of fun. It's not like that hockey atmosphere where it's a lot of screaming and yelling, but it's a lot of at least not a lot of as much screaming and yelling in the stands, a little bit more on the ice, but just the environment coming down and spending a little bit of time in the Patch and hearing some of the stories from days gone by and seeing all the people from different provinces who come in for this event, and it's quite a little culture that goes on at the Brier.
We were talking about, I read an article today in the paper, and Jenn was saying she used to be, or she's been curling a long time, so she's seen it grow up, and there's kind of the words about curling being cool now. Is that the feeling down there amongst all you guys, that curling is the hip thing now?
And I think, yeah, absolutely. It definitely is. We've always thought it was pretty hip, but, now it's kind of getting a little bit more attention. And, and I think a lot of credit goes to the guys like the Brad Gushes, the John Morrises, the guys like that, the young, likable sort of personalities that people relate to. This isn't an old man's game. This is a sport. This is a sport with people that condition themselves. They train year round. And I think people are really starting to appreciate that now more than ever.